took this Veterans Day as an opportunity to reflect on our connections to veterans and to share some strategies and stories that help us hold the humanity of veterans, even as we may disagree with military conflict. Please note we had some trouble with our audio, especially near the beginning of this episode. It does improve over the episode, and we will work to address it moving forward. And we thank you for your patience.
This is Jews Talk Racial Justice with April and Tracie,
a weekly show hosted by April Baskin and Tracie Guy Decker.
In a complex world, change takes courage.
Wholehearted relationships can keep us accountable.
Hi, everybody. Today is Veterans Day. Happy Veterans Day, especially if there are any veterans listening. Happy Veterans Day. Thank you so much for your service. Tracie and I both have some pretty substantial proximity to veterans, and there's both a number of Jews who have served in the military, including my grandfather. And I also think discussing the military beyond sort of an abstraction or at times like Veterans Day, I think it would be helpful for us, Tracie, to bring some visibility to the service and leadership and courage of veterans who are close to us in our lives, and lift that up, because I think it gets lifted up in services briefly, but in the context of mainstream Jewish culture, I just think it's worthwhile for us to open this. And there's a range of different issues that this touches upon around, and we're going to focus in on specifically a number of the veterans and the impact that some of them have personally had on our lives. And so I think it's best for us to start this conversation there, and then see if potentially in other future episodes, if this may be something that we revisit, or if this is just whole as it is. Over to you, Tracie.
So I may have mentioned on the show before, I don't know if I have or not, but my partner, my husband, is a veteran from the U.S. Navy. He recently retired after 22 years of service. And
Wow.
So, yeah. I'm in very close proximity with a veteran. And on Veterans Day, Memorial Day, I often think about the fact that though at the surface level, American society is very appreciative of our veterans. You see yellow ribbons on cars, and we have the day off for Veterans Day, or some of us do, I guess. When you dig a little deeper, you see how qualified that support actually has been at different moments. Before we started recording, I named the fact that there were Black veterans after World War II who were beaten for wearing the uniform. That I know, April, there are folks in your family.
Yeah, my Grandpa Joe. My Grandpa Joe was a first sergeant in the U.S. Army.
So your grandfather was a Black first sergeant in the 40s. It's a big deal. That's a big deal. So during the time of World War II, he achieved the rank of first sergeant in the U.S. Army.
Yeah. And he is amazing and emotional. He was beloved. He said he started a interracial baseball league in Guam. I think his story was briefly that when they first came back, they went to have a meal and they wouldn't serve him. And that's one of the few times I ever saw my grandpa cry. And it kind of hit him unexpectedly, and the pain he felt of remembering that after having served in Guam, and to come back and not be served with the rest of the group was really painful. When that thing happened with the restaurant, my grandpa cried, but apparently his, whatever it's called, platoon, what's it? The white members,
the folks in his unit,
tore up the restaurant. They were because he was I was just fine, and they were this. They loved it so much.
Yeah.
And stayed with him all those years later.
And I've read oral histories from Black GIs returning from Europe, from World War II, who realized that they went over there to fight discrimination and hatred, and then came back to discrimination and hatred. So they were, fighting on two fronts. So there's that. And actually the structural differences as well. So the GI Bill, which made homeownership a reality, and within reach to so many soldiers returning from World War II, because of the way that redlining and home loans worked, Black GIs were unable to access this very important affirmative action, this very important access to wealth, and intergenerational wealth. And this is one of those moments in history that I will point to when I talk to other white Jews who want to say, I'm not white, I'm Jewish, because returning Jewish white GIs were able to use their VA loans and get and have access to homeownership in ways that their Black shipmates, sorry, my husband's Navy, their Black shipmates were not able to. So
may I quickly clarify?
Yeah.
Is that when you were mentioning the GI Bill and you were talking about it as like sort of a leg up for Black folks, that I think it wasn't actually affirmative action, since everyone hypothetically was supposed to have access.
Well,
was hypothetically at the federal level,
it ended up being affirmative action for white people.
Right.
Yeah. It ended up being affirmative action for white people. That was not what it was supposed to be.
And not even, and it was even more than affirmative action, since they weren't needing affirmative action to begin with. So whatever is above.
Right. Yeah. So that moment, when I think about Veterans Day, I think about those veterans who didn't have access to the same kind of supports, whether soft supports of like, attaboy, thank you for your service, or the actual more structural supports of a loan, a 30-year mortgage with a low or no down payment. And I also think about after the Vietnam War, when so many soldiers returned from this unpopular war and were forced to sort of, I don't know, take responsibility for policies that they had, that they did have to enforce, but had no say in actually writing. And so they were just, there was a whole generation of veterans who came back from Vietnam who were just left holding the bag of PTSD and chemical toxicity from the Agent Orange and all the other terrible things that war does to a person they were left holding those things without the rest of us there sort of saying like, thank you for doing what you did. And that I hold that really, I try to hold that while not appreciating the policies, like you named the people before we started recording, April. And that's something that has always really felt very important to me. I was in graduate school during the Gulf War. And so I was on the campus of the University of Chicago, and there was a lot of righteous anger at the war among my undergraduate colleagues. I was a graduate student, and there was even there were these young people who set up tents on the quad, and it was like a live-in until the troops were withdrawn, and I saw a lot of that sort of either or thinking that really directed at military individuals. This is long before I was married to a sailor, or even considered that possibility. But I actually started a little counter movement that sort of said, support people, support peace, and really tried to foreground the fact that we're talking about
Tracie.
Human beings. And I put people first.
Yes.
Because I felt like the peaceniks who were camping on the quad at the University of Chicago were so angry in their righteousness that I felt they were dehumanizing our military, our U.S. military, but others as well. And I just had this instinct that wasn't the way to peace, that dehumanization. Yeah, we had, we would do prayer. We would have like a little prayer circle around the flagpole on the quad where these young people were camping, and just tell stories of people the best of humanity that was coming out of the stories of the Gulf War, stories about Iraqis who put themselves in harm's way in order to help protect U.S. soldiers or sailors, or other Iraqis, about U.S. soldiers and sailors who were doing what they could to protect human dignity and life, even while in the midst of this conflict. And I'm too young to have lived through the return
or blame.
Yeah. So
Or like,
I wasn't actually socially aware as Vietnam vets were coming home, but the stories of Vietnam vets and the traumas that they faced on returning to society always sat really heavy on me as I learned about it, even though I was learning it mostly as history. And I really didn't want that to happen again on my watch when I was socially aware. And so that was what drove me to start this little counter protest. This support people thing.
Tracie, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And it just affirms how much I love you and how I'm so grateful to the universe for bringing us together, and for Noah being the messenger of the universe who specifically helped facilitate this. I just loved what you shared, and you shared sort of something you said, and I can't quite remember. Maybe it'll come back to me, that like had like a light bulb thing that I was like, oh, that's so good to share. But I love this. Support people, support peace. Oof, that's so good. And so some of the things that I think I want to add to this right now, to this first part of potentially a longer conversation, I'd like to share some stories.
Yeah.
So these are some of the things, as I think about veterans and my family, these are just some various anecdotes I want to share. Is that I feel like, not just because of the military, I also think in some ways it's spiritual, and it just so happens that they also engage in the military. I feel like I come from a family of warriors spiritually. And so many of the men in my family are so brave in a lot of different ways, and are really supportive. And in addition to giving me access to USAA, which I love, not getting commission on that. I love the things I love. I love USAA. My grandpa is an amazing packer, which apparently he got in the military. And I would come and visit, and between my 3 aunts, I would come back with so many clothes, and my grandpa always managed to fit it all in. Like, he was like a mess. Like, one of his, like, is in a lot of ways now, you wouldn't inherently know, unlike, say, like my uncle, who was Green Beret and who everything about him exudes military. Like, hey, Uncle Greg, do you like making music? I really love sound engineering. No, Andrew, I make music with machine guns. Okay? like that's Uncle Greg. But my Grandpa Paul is much more, he does like corporate and medical management, and you wouldn't necessarily know, but so like that. So that's like a smaller, subtle thing, is that he's like a master packer, which apparently he learned in the military. Growing up, my dad had different sayings that came out of his basic training experience. My dad has lots of little sayings or jokes he has that he just finds funny, and he loved to say, even if he didn't fully mean it, he would just be like, okay, don't take forever. But he always loved to say, eat it now, taste it later. Because apparently
was that a thing?
That was a thing that he was told in basic training. And also apparently when they were like outside in the morning, and my dad, it's just the kind of humor he has. He likes to point out quirks and things, which occasionally got me in trouble as a kid, but it also taught me, along with my mother's humor in different ways, to take a number of things less seriously. So apparently, like, one of his basic training sergeants always used to say, and my dad translated it to children. And when he'd wake up in the morning, he'd be like, whoa, your breath smells like wolf dookie. Clean your stuff. Anyway, so, and he also liked calling us cockroaches. It's just the whole thing. Like you said, like, because at times we would be playing and then we would run and hide what we were doing. So he like said we were like cockroaches. Anyway, it's just, It's funny to us, okay?
I believe you.
So anyway, maybe it's also partly the intention and the love behind it, And I have those memories, and then I grew up hearing about my uncle, who is one of those folks who's like certifiably a genius, who like literally studied astrophysics or rocket science or whatever in college, and went on to serve in special forces and spoke like like Arabic, Russian. He was a Russian linguist. He was in Russia during the Cold War. Apparently his teammates, whatever their fellow soldier, warrior people, called him the Baskinator.
Nice.
Because he was really hardcore. And he's been like this since he was a kid. Like, it's kind of like this role, like he was, like when he was a kid, he would make rockets, and like people would like tell all kinds of like, they're like myths about my uncle, how like they were playing football one day. There's this big dude, and my uncle like grabbed him by his head and like whipped him out of the way. He was just amazing athleticism and courage. And then after he retired and he became a veteran, and he works for a local office of the VA working with other vets.
Cool.
Which it was a while after he retired from his career service, but I'm really glad he found that.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I saw in him and various other people, and I saw this when I spent time in Israel, Palestine, particularly with Israeli soldiers. I was able to relate to some of them because at times I saw patterns or behavior within them, like smoking or just being really quiet, and like clearly as someone who's empathic, clearly carrying a lot, but having a lot of things where there aren't a lot of venues because much of what they've experienced is restricted, is highly confidential.
Yeah, there's also that piece of it, the fact that they carry so much and have so few venues to talk about it, actually really weighs on me a bit, because
Me too.
my husband, so he had, all kinds of clearances. And so he served, with folks who were doing really classified things. And it's actually the case that your clearance can be in jeopardy if you seek assistance for mental health, which
Absolutely.
both makes sense because they don't want someone who is unstable, who has, access to state secrets, and also it just sets up our soldiers and sailors and spies for suffering, because then they can't seek help. We all have mental health problems.
Yeah, as someone who gets a lot of healing, it's just something I think about a lot.
Yeah.
And that with there's specifically a couple family members where I, like if I had more resources, like I wanted them to get the support they need, but some of them, depending upon exactly what levels of clearance they had and the types of things they were involved with, there's almost no one in it. It's like a heartbreak that I've carried for a while.
And to be clear, like the folks who are having like true distress that need help, like the military and the structures are there,
right.
there is help, but then they have to do a different job. They lose their clearance and they have to actually get reassigned. So for folks who have, just like everyday crap that we all have that we need to work through, and it helps to work through with like talking it through. If you seek help, you could be jeopardizing your job. And if you love what you do, then, that's a terrible choice that we put on our service members, I think.
And so I would just love to put out in the universe that I would love, like into the ether, that I would love for among also, and just in general, there be more peace, so that a number of soldiers and future possible veterans don't have to be veterans, because that isn't needed. I also want this to be more figure outable, because as you said, like for certain men in my family, that was never even a question. Like they took they would like that was something I wanted for them.
Right.
That I don't even know if some of them I think they did want, and other things I think that's so just not where their head is. But I could see this person is functional by society's standards, but either I know who this person was before, or that they could like, just like many people, that they could benefit from not having to carry all of these things alone.
Yeah. And we see that. I mean, like, how many, too many. If it were one, it would be too many. And it's a lot more than one of our veterans who actually end up homeless because of drug addiction, because of mental health issues, because of whatever it might be. Like, it shouldn't be the case. I mean, the sacrifices that our service members make in war or in peacetime. I mean, I've seen it firsthand. Their families make sacrifices, and they make sacrifices, and we should take care of them. We just, as a society, we should be taking care of them. It breaks my heart. There's a U.S. Navy veteran with a cardboard sign that he works a corner that I drive past when I go to pick my daughter up from school. And whenever I have money, I always give him some, and I thank him for his service. And it's not enough.
Right. Yeah. And both my brother and I opted to not go into the military, though, when I was in high school. And I think for my brother too, it was something that we both considered, in part because it's so ubiquitous, and also because it's in our family. And we both have consciously chosen to not take that path. And I think specifically the thing that I just want to lift up, that I already have, I want to lift up the positives and the joy, and that we chose not to do that. We have a cousin who is an officer in the Marines. And as I mentioned before, a number of decorated military veterans throughout my family. My grandfather, he also received the Bronze Star, which General MacArthur racistly refused to bestow upon him. So General Doolittle stepped in and gave him the Bronze Star to a Black man. And what I'm trying to say is that my brother and I have not chosen that path. And I also feel so proud of my family members, both present and past, who have served. And not just of their service, but they are incredibly nuanced men with a variety of political views and perspectives, and often with some of the most rigorous critiques of this country, feeling as though they have more than earned the right and have a perspective from what their service exposed them to in terms of the global landscape and different things. And so I think we've mostly achieved our goal here of wanting to add some nuance to some of the conversation that may happen on Veterans Day, to add a personal touch, to share some high points, and just also bring visibility about these important folks in our society and within our communities and within our families. And that we can, as Tracie put it from the outset, advocate for peace and also support the people around us, and support folks who have served, in not just theoretical ways, but in very real and visceral ways. So happy Veterans Day, and specifically happy Veterans Day to our beloved vets. Tracie, do you want to close us out?
Veterans Day is a symbol that relies on other symbols, and all of those symbols can be used for, as all symbols, can be used for good and for ill. And I just want to invite us all to remember the nuance and hold both and really, as I said when I was in grad school, focus on the people.
Thanks for tuning in. Our show's theme music was composed by Elliot Hammer. You can find this track and other beats on Instagram at Elliot Hammer. If this episode resonated with you, please share it and subscribe. To join the conversation, visit JewsTalkRacialJustice.com, where you can send us a question or suggestion, access our show notes, and learn more about our team. Take care until next time, and stay humble and keep going.